Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Self Illumination Podcast. If you haven't been watching the episodes, I am Akasha Searcy, and I'm really here to help people move beyond the veil or the matrix or any system that is keeping you from living a free, sovereign life. And today, my guest, Ashley Bear, knows all about this. She is a dear friend and a mindfulness teacher. She is also inside of the education system. And the thing that I really want you to note about her is that she's all around a beautiful human being who's creating great change inside of our education system with mindfulness and meditation and movement. And I'm so excited to speak with you today, Ashley. I think that we're going to have some awesome conversation, and let's just kind of dive in and tell everyone a little bit about how you got into mindfulness and meditation. What was your journey to that space?
Sure. Well, first, thanks for having me. I love talking about mindfulness. I can talk about it all day long, so I'm happy to be here. I wouldn't be able to really talk about my experience without mentioning you because I saw you one day when I was at work. You came and did a presentation on yoga. And my first thought was, I have to study with this woman. And that's what I did. And I became a yoga teacher with you. And one of our pieces of homework that you gave us was to meditate every day for 5 minutes. So when I first started doing that, the first thing I noticed was how I wanted to get up about 7 times in that 5-minute span. And I realized how distracted I was. And it really helped me understand I needed meditation in my life. And I've been meditating since. And the funny thing about that is someone told me in my 20s, an acting teacher in Los Angeles told me that I needed meditation, mindfulness, yoga, that I was not in my body. And I didn't even understand what he meant at that time. And I just thought, yeah, that's super weird stuff. It's not for me. And I just made a judgment and never attempted it again until I met you.
Well, thank you for the up, I really appreciate that. It's so awesome to know that you're having an impact on a life, right? And I love that you brought up that in like 5 minutes, you wanted to get out of that stillness like 7 times. And I think that that's the thing. There's a couple things, really juicy nuggets that you just said, introducing yourself. One of those is that people just kind of want to get up and move. And they don't understand that it's a practice that has to evolve over time. And the biggest juicy tidbit there is recognizing that you want to move, that you are distracted, right? I love how you language that. And then also, that you had someone in your 20s tell you that you would benefit from movement, meditation, and mindfulness. And at that time, you were like, oh, that's just weird. Right? Because I think don't you think there's still a little bit of a stigma around that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I imagine you run into that. For those of you that are watching this, Ashley and I are both located in the southeastern United States. Even though we've lived all over the world, we are in this place right now. And I feel like because of some history, that there is a little bit more of a stigma still around meditation and mindfulness, and of course, yoga or movement practices. Do you feel the same way, Ashley?
Yes. So where I work and live, it's a very conservative county. And this is one of the first things I address. I teach mindfulness to teachers. And the first thing I address are the myths behind it and what we're doing, and that you can be any religion and practice mindfulness. That we'll be addressing movement and breathing, and anyone can do it regardless of who they worship or, what they practice. And a teacher said to me, the very first time I did the training, she came up to me and said, I'm so glad you addressed this. I'm Southern Baptist. And honestly, I was scared to come to your training. And I said, okay, well, how do you feel now? She said, I feel really good about it. I'm going to be breathing and moving my body, and I can do that and still pray. And I said, awesome. So I addressed that right off the beginning. And I think that alleviates any misconceptions.
Yeah, I think it does also, and I think that that is something that the world as in total is waking up to, is that these are in essence universal practices. There's a book that I always recommend to people who are of the Christian faith, and it's titled The Yoga of Jesus. And it's a really lovely book because it talks about the time that Jesus, the man, because I definitely refer to that as Christ consciousness, but Jesus, the man, spent time in India. And there are these years that a lot of people don't talk about. And so I love being able to bring that awareness that meditation and mindfulness is universal. It does go into all faiths. In that time that you have with your source or your deity of choice is really, that is mindfulness, right? That prayer time. And I personally have always felt like yoga is prayer with my body. It's like a full body prayer. So I love how you are just right out of the gates speaking to what could be an unconscious layer of resistance, right? Based on programming. And so this really brings me to, I'd love for you to share with people that are listening or watching, depending on what platform, what meditation and mindfulness and yoga has done for you. Because I know you said, you had people say you weren't in your body. So clearly you're feeling that more, but I would love for you to tell us what that means for you.
Okay. Well, I was not in my body in my 20s, probably since I was 8 years old. I had a traumatic event, lost my mother, when I was in second grade. So I think at that point, I started kind of leaving my body and just checking out of my current life. I didn't have a good home situation. And so that was just something I have learned that I did as a
you were disassociating, literally.
There, but I was just always in my head or imagination, and people couldn't gain my attention. I was very spacey, still am a little bit. And then during my acting lessons, that's when the teacher was like, okay, you're not even here. And he started kind of addressing my history with me. And that's when he suggested yoga and mindfulness. So I suffered from anxiety and depression since 8 till I learned these practices, I would say. I had done therapy. I had, tried to work through things. And I still really was crippled with anxiety and depression when I met you. And through these practices of just getting into my body and learning how to apply concepts of mindfulness to address my issues with my past and grief that had been unaddressed, it really saved my life, in my opinion. I wouldn't say I suffer from anxiety and depression anymore. While I might still, it comes up once in a while, then I just apply a practice. So for me, it was literally life-saving, changed my entire life, how I walk in this world.
Oh man, that's so powerful for people to hear. And I love how, no matter what age you are, because we're going to talk about how you're working with different age groups inside of the school system, it really speaks to the universal nature of this practice, right? Or these practices, because what you're really talking about for people that are listening to this, that, I always say are way more educated than me, like Ashley is with psychology and behavior, is that we're talking about, this is a somatic psychology is really what's going on with these practices. And I think that that's something that from the outside, if you're just looking at oh, this is a person who just teaches yoga. And a lot of times people don't realize, those of us that are devoted to movement arts, to this lifestyle of mindfulness and to the practice of meditation daily, that we're quite cerebral with how we approach things. And that in itself is another layer of we need to integrate. And so when you can embody those sensations through these practices, what happens is you're really noticing that it's easier for you to discharge and not disassociate, which is what it sounds like to me you really started feeling for yourself.
Yes, I really started trying to be here no matter what was happening, where before things would happen, which that's life, stuff happens, I would just okay, got to check out, got to drink, got to do whatever, got to literally check out. And now I just try to move through it and feel it to heal it. when you talked about working with all ages, it's fascinating how everyone always tells me the same thing, whether I'm working with an adult teacher or a little child. Most say, this is life-changing. From a first grader that stopped me, that I taught breath and movement to, ran to me on the last day of class and just followed me out to the hall and said, I just want you to know you helped me with my anger. And my first thought was, you have anger? This little teeny child, who was adorable. I just couldn't believe in first grade. But, me in second grade, I had anger. So if I apply it to myself, I do understand that. But then an adult will tell me the same thing. Like, this was life-changing. This helped me with anxiety. This helped me with a trauma I had. Or it's almost, I get the same feedback of.
And that, again, we go back, I keep coming back to this word of universal, right? Because sometimes we think universal is thought oriented, but we don't realize that even with this on the ground awareness, right? You're talking about someone who's a first grader. What is that? 5, 6 years old. And then someone who is a grown-up adult, living their life that they're completely in control of, and they're having this common experience. And, this really leads me into something that I wanted to ask you, which was, how have you seen it affect different age groups? Because I know that you're working through K through 12, but I also know that you're working with the teachers as well, right? And with the counselors, and then the Board of Education. Like, you really got this very different, all these multiple dimensions of what you're offering when it comes to mindfulness practices inside of the school. And then I think a bumper question to that is, what resistance have you met, right? And then how are you working to solve that? So that was a really multiple layer question. So let's just start with how it's been for you and what you're seeing in all these different age brackets.
So I'm going to piggyback on what you said earlier about sometimes people thinking I'm just this yoga teacher. And I really see myself as teaching science of the brain and the nervous system, and how our nervous systems work day to day when we walk in a room, how we're looking for another nervous system to co-regulate, to bring that calm. And if a teacher is dysregulated, which sometimes is hard for teachers to hear or admit, and they say, oh, well, I don't say this out loud, I may be having a bad day, I think it. And so I really try to get them to understand that that's the same impact as whether you say it or you're thinking it. And so teachers will write me letters after the training. I had a girl who came through the training. She was probably 23. It was her first year teaching. She was going to come to the training originally, and then decided she didn't have time for the 3-day. It's like a 3-day immersion. And then she came the second year. She told me her first year teaching was the lowest point of her life. She was ready to quit teaching. She was having health problems. And she kept seeing the teacher next door having this beautiful year. Kids were totally engaged and well-behaved and happy. And she went over and said, what are you doing? And she said, oh, I did this mindfulness training. I really addressed myself, and that helps with the kids. And so this girl then came to the training and shared this and wrote me a letter after that said, you literally saved my life. And she said, the very first day after I left your training, they'll come to me, then they go back to their class. She did a homework I gave, which is a 5-minute meditation. And then she walked in the class without saying a word. And the student, and this is, I believe, kindergartner first, said, you're so happy today, and it makes me happy to be here with you. And she said she went in her car and just cried, because it validated what I tried to explain to them about the nervous system and how kids feel what you're bringing into the room. You are the leading presence of that room. And if you're not calm mentally and in a good place, kids feel it, and they're not going to be able to learn and be in a safe space.
Oh, I love that you just use that word safe. There's a teacher that one of my mentors, and she says, you are safe, and it is safe to be safe. And I think that is just, every time she says it, like even now I'm saying it, but I'm hearing her and I get these chills on my body, because It is so powerful, right? To know that you are in a safe space. And this is something that a lot of people probably don't know about me. I know Ashley knows it because we're very dear friends. Is when I was growing up, school was actually safer than my home life. And to have this practice, I had a very unconventional school life because the school that I was in was testing a quote unquote gifted program. So that really saved me. And I can only imagine how phenomenal it would be to have, what you're bringing to the table at that time, because I had anxiety disorder, panic disorder, complex PTSD. I mean, there were all these labels thrown on me, but there was not a support system. And what I really feel like you are doing is that you are creating this support system and really inviting a system, I believe the education system is a flawed system. Those listening may not agree, and that's absolutely fine. But I believe that you are affecting change inside of a system that's lacking support for people who don't have that quote unquote idyllic home life, or they don't have that support at home. So for a teacher to realize, this is making me, I'm getting this like just thought process, for a teacher to realize that they are incongruent. The last episode that I did was with my mentor, Angel. And when you realize that you are incongruent, it helps you understand that everything you're bringing to the table is incongruent. And people are going to pick up on that because everything is energy. And I think it's very ignorant of an adult, and I'm using that word intentionally because ignorant is innocent. I think it is very ignorant of an adult to assume that children can't pick up on that, because children operate from energy dominantly until the age of 7 because the conscious mind hasn't come online yet, right? So I love hearing that this teacher had this huge paradigm shift and was able to see it in another classroom and have that realization of like, I want to know what's going on over there and why it's not going on over here. Right. And that's so inspiring. So my next question to you is, how are you seeing it affect like older kids who really, they're more communicative, they have more programming? Like, how are you seeing that effect?
Well, it's funny. I ran into a former student that actually was in our mindfulness pilot program that we did with Georgia State University. And I had not seen her. It was like pre-COVID, I believe. And I was in T-Mobile and I just was looking at her and I said, "Did you go to school in Forsyth County?" And she's like, "Yes." And I said, "Were you in the mindfulness pilot?" And she just instantly, her arms went around me and we just stood there and hugged. And of all the students of all the classes that I would want to see, it was this one. She was really struggling when she came in. And on the last day of school, she said, the last day of class, she said, "I want you to know you changed my life." And like, we both just like cried, boohooed. I'm totally distracted from what your question was.
No, it's great because you really are in line with it. It's, how is it affecting young adults? These
young adults.
This is literally like, we know, you and I especially know as people inside of educational systems, that little kids are sponges and they are so resilient. They'll soak things up so rapidly, integrate it so beautifully. But by the time that conscious mind comes online at 7, you've had all this programming, especially if you come from a childhood like myself, where there wasn't that type of support for self-development, growth, and stability. And so I'm really curious, like when you work with teenagers, what's the buy-in like? What's the resistance like? How do you, how do you see them really take it and run with it, so to speak?
Middle school and high school, definitely more resistant, but open. In elementary, I walk in, kids clap and cheer just when I step in the room because they know I'm just going to get them up and breathing. Middle school, I work in high school in smaller groups where I walk in. Once I really explain the science behind what we're doing, the buy-in comes in. And even I went to a high school group in our county and I would teach like once a week on a wellness Wednesday. And this girl kind of was, a little more interested in her phone. I kept offering her to kind of disengage with that for a minute, engage with me. We reconnected when I started teaching classes in the alternative school. So she had shifted from the regular school to the alternative school. And that's also where I bring in these practices. They're for kids who have gotten in trouble. And she saw me and said, "You used to come to my class at the high school." And this time she was totally open. She became one of my best students, the same girl. It really was almost what's the word?
Synchronistic or synchronistic, I hear. Yeah.
That she ended up working with me again in a different setting. And I mean, she loved it. And she told me later, we're going on vacation. I'm making sure they have mindfulness at the hotel so I can keep practicing. She really bought in. Once I really give them the science, most kids, most people I have found have anxiety, have stress, have panic attacks, have overwhelm. And the minute I can teach them that we can regulate our nervous systems with breath, they're almost willing to listen. I have many high school groups that I work in, small groups with some of the IB, the gifted programs, where they have this huge amount of stress. And so I go in and teach them how to handle the stress with breath, with movements, different activities. So they really buy in once they have the science. They're not quite as ready as an elementary kid. If I say, "Hey, who wants to do this?" They're all like, "Me." They all just immediately join in. But I found science and getting them in the practice and just letting them feel it is really the buy-in.
And now, have you noticed that that is the same for the adults? Like, it sounds like you've got some teachers who are just like, "Ooh, I want this." And then some teachers who are like, "I can't make time." And are you using the same method or, the same technique to get their buy-in as well?
Pretty much. So we don't mandate any of this. It's all voluntary. People can come if they're interested, but I ask administrators not to force teachers in because I want teachers who show up who want to know and want to be there. But every once in a while it happens that someone's voluntold into the training.
Voluntold, I love that.
But I usually find that I shift them by the end of the first day. They'll kind of say, "Well, I didn't really want to be here. I got kind of asked to come." And I say, "Okay, that's cool. Like, let's hope you get something out of these 3 days." And usually by the end of day one, they're like, "I'm so happy I'm here." Like, it shifts, but it's all the same. It's giving them that experience. I start taking them through different practices so they can see which one connects. Because while some may connect with movement, some are going to connect with breath or some of the more playful things I do, like a lot of games. Most of what I do is playful. We do mindful eating, mindful coloring, mindful movement. We do games, lots of fun games that teachers freak out when I put them in a game, which is interesting. And I'll say, "But this is what kids do in class. You're putting them in performance and there's a grade attached. We don't have grades attached." So it's just bringing people into the moment and giving them that experience, like out of the head, out of the thoughts.
Yeah, I love that you say that because this is something I say all the time with private clients, with classes, with trainings, is that words do not teach, experience does. And our words are to share our wisdom, right? But if you can get people to have an experience, that is something you can give them wisdom to understand how to share with other people. And this idea of voluntold, I love that inside of a system, right? It's definitely not language I would have come up with, but man, I'm so going to use that again. This idea of you're still meeting some resistance, it sounds like. And part of that is, I imagine because it is a school system and it takes a little while for things to make these big shifts. Because when I look at other places in the country, it's like, duh, of course we offer yoga and mindfulness. Because it is, the science is behind it. And I think that that's something that is really important inside of an education system because it is a machine, right? At the end of the day, it's a machine that has many cogs. And if it doesn't line up properly, it's going to spit it out and go on to the next thing that fits into the system better. So I love hearing that you're really approaching this, no matter what age it is, from this aspect of this is what's happening with the nervous system. This is how this helps your nervous system. And then on top of that, you have this lived experience of your own life, right? And I really would love for you to share with people how they can find you, like how they can get in touch with you. Because if there are people watching this that are in the education system and they want to know how to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, sure. So I just did my first training for teachers outside of our school system. I worked with some in a different county, also in a different state. So that
awesome.
Was mindfulnesswithashley.com. That's perfect. My website. They can find me there. I'm on Instagram as far as social media, which is Miss Ashley Bear, MISS. And yeah, that's probably the best ways.
Perfect. And I'll make sure for those of you that are watching this on YouTube to place those links directly under the video in the description. So you'll be able to reach out to her directly. And then of course you can get on my email list, and then this will be sent out immediately so that you will have that contact information. And I want to say, Ashley, thanks so much for being a change maker, because it's definitely got to be full of some hard days. And I'd love, if you don't mind, just sharing something that you come back to on those hard days when you feel like you are meeting resistance. What is a practice that you might want to share with our listeners?
On the hard days, always movement, getting into my body, particularly child's pose. I get in that. I kind of ground myself. Meditation.
And meditate.
Oh, I forgot. I'm on the Insight Timer, which I think.
Awesome. Yes. I'll make sure that I link that Insight Timer as well, because Ashley has a beautiful voice. I'm a big fan of her nidras, but all things that she does are lovely on there. So hopefully you'll check that out. And as always, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you back here next time. And in the meantime, stay illuminated. And thank you so much, Ashley. I really appreciate you sharing time with me and all the listeners. Bye, everybody.